Hollywood loves blowing stuff up, but when it comes to recreating history's bloodiest conflict, which battle scenes truly stand the test of time? Not just explosions, but the mud, blood, and sheer terror that actual veterans recognize. Did you know one director had soldiers dig their own foxholes for authenticity, while another used actual veterans with missing limbs for realism? Let's dive into cinematic warfare that even the toughest military historians respect. Number 10. When Trumpets Fade. 1998. HBO dropped this brutal masterpiece in 1998 and then seemingly forgot about it. The Battle of Hurtgen Forest wasn't just another skirmish. It was literally called a meat grinder by military historians, and director John Irvin refused to sanitize a single second of it. Ron Eldard plays Private Manning, a battle-fatigued soldier who only wants to escape the hellscape but gets promoted when his entire unit gets slaughtered. What makes this battle sequence revolutionary is its complete rejection of Hollywood heroics. The combat unfolds in a muddy, freezing forest where soldiers can barely see the enemy, stepping on landmines, getting lost, and dying pointlessly. Irvin insisted his actors march through actual mud for days to capture the physical exhaustion. No sweeping camera movements or dramatic music, just handheld chaos and the constant sound of men screaming for medics. Military consultant Captain Dale Dye called it the most accurate portrayal of infantry combat fatigue I've ever seen on film. When test audiences complained the battle scenes were too grim, HBO executives actually wanted to brighten the footage, but Irvin threatened to remove his name if they did. Unlike most war films, when soldiers die here, they don't get heroic last words. They just drop, often unseen by their comrades. The forest itself becomes the enemy, with one WWII veteran consultant noting, "The movie got one thing absolutely right. We feared the woods more than the Germans." Number 9. The Battle of San Pietro, 1945. This isn't just another war documentary. It's the moment the US military realized they couldn't control how Americans saw battle. Director John Huston, who later made classics like The Maltese Falcon, was commissioned to make a propaganda film, but instead delivered something so brutally honest that the Army tried to suppress it. The Battle of San Pietro claimed over 100 American lives in December 1943, and Huston's cameras caught every awful moment. What makes this footage extraordinary is that Huston and his crew were genuinely under fire, crawling alongside the 36th Infantry Division as they fought house to house. There's no dramatic reenactment here. When you see soldiers falling, they're actually dying. The Army was so disturbed by the raw footage that General George Marshall initially banned it, saying, "This isn't war, it's slaughter." Huston had to cut nearly 30% before they would release it. The battle sequence revolutionized war cinematography with its shaky cameras, dirt-caked lenses, and moments where the cameraman clearly drops to the ground to avoid being shot. Modern directors like Spielberg studied this footage frame by frame for Saving Private Ryan. When shown to war correspondents at the Pentagon in 1944, 3 reportedly vomited. Military historian S.L.A. Marshall later wrote, "Huston managed what no other filmmaker accomplished during the war. He showed battle as the chaotic nightmare it truly is." The film's power comes from its absolute rejection of glory, focusing instead on exhausted men trying not to die in an Italian village most Americans couldn't locate on a map. Number 8. Das Boot, 1981. Wolfgang Petersen didn't just make a submarine movie, he created a 149-minute panic attack that actual U-boat veterans called painfully authentic. The extended patrol and depth charge sequences in Das Boot don't glamorize underwater warfare. They reveal it as a claustrophobic horror show where 40 men lived in sweat-soaked terror inside a metal tube. When the film premiered, 7 former German submariners reportedly suffered breakdowns, believing they were back in combat. What makes the battle sequences revolutionary is Petersen's technical innovation. He built a full-scale submarine interior on hydraulic lifts that could be tilted and shaken violently, forcing actors to slam against walls exactly as the real sailors would have. The production was so grueling that several actors developed claustrophobia and had to be temporarily removed from the set. Petersen shot for nearly a year, often in sequential order, so the actors' deteriorating mental states would match those of actual submarine crews. The film's most intense sequence follows the U-96 as it's hammered by depth charges for over 15 minutes of screen time. With no cutaways or relief, viewers experience the psychological torture of waiting to die as the hull creaks under pressure. Admiral Karl Dönitz, who commanded Germany's U-boat fleet during WWII, reportedly watched the film shortly before his death and simply said, "It was like that, only worse." Peterson's refusal to cut away during the battles created such authenticity that the film is now shown at naval academies worldwide to demonstrate the psychological effects of submarine warfare. One German veteran who consulted on the film later admitted, "I still can't sleep with the bedroom door closed." Number 7. Downfall, 2004. Oliver Hirschbiegel didn't just recreate Hitler's final days. He plunged viewers into the apocalyptic madness of Berlin's collapse in April 1945. The battle scenes depicting the Soviet assault on the Nazi capital aren't the typical war movie fare of heroic stands and stirring speeches. They're a descent into urban warfare hell, where children and elderly men were forced to defend a ruined city while Hitler ranted in his underground bunker. What makes the battle portrayal groundbreaking is its unflinching depiction of civilian suffering alongside military combat. Russian T-34 tanks crush barricades made of streetcars while terrified teenagers armed with Panzerfausts ambush them from bombed-out buildings. Military consultant Günter Bolt, who was present in Hitler's bunker during the actual battle, verified the film's details down to the specific weapons used in different sectors of the city. The film's most harrowing sequence shows the Volkssturm, Germany's desperate last-ditch militia composed of boys and old men, facing Soviet heavy artillery without proper training or equipment. Hirschbiegel used actual Soviet battle footage as reference, matching the camera angles and lighting so precisely that some critics initially thought he had incorporated archival material. When the film premiered in Russia, several Red Army veterans had to leave the theater during these scenes, finding them too accurate to endure. German military historian Jürg Muth described the Berlin sequences as the most accurate depiction of the breakdown of a modern military system ever filmed. The battle's authenticity comes not just from the combat details, but from capturing the complete psychological collapse of a society, where fanaticism, fear, and the instinct to survive created a uniquely nightmarish form of urban warfare that military experts still study today as a worst-case scenario of a capital city's fall. Number 6. Letters from Iwo Jima, 2006. Clint Eastwood didn't just make a war movie. He created a haunting meditation on duty, death, and cultural clash from the Japanese perspective that actual Iwo Jima veterans called uncomfortably accurate. Shot almost entirely in Japanese, the battle sequences don't glorify either side, but instead capture the desperate struggle of Japanese soldiers who knew they were fighting a hopeless battle. Military advisors from both Japanese and American forces praised Eastwood for showing what most war films ignore: the humanity of the enemy. What makes the battle depiction revolutionary is Eastwood's technical precision. He recreated the volcanic island's unique black sand beaches and sulfurous caves using locations in Iceland and California, then employed military consultants to ensure every detail from uniform buttons to radio procedures was period accurate. The film's desaturated color palette makes the blood stand out in stark contrast, creating battle scenes that feel documentary-like in their realism. The film's most intense sequence shows the Japanese soldiers holed up in tunnels as American flamethrowers and demolition teams methodically clear each position. Japanese veterans who consulted on the film verified the accuracy of these harrowing moments, with one noting, "The Americans weren't monsters, and we weren't samurai. We were all just terrified men trying to survive." When the film premiered in Osaka, Japan, several elderly veterans stood and bowed toward the screen. Military historian James Bradley, whose father helped raise the American flag on Iwo Jima, called the battle sequences a masterclass in historical accuracy without propaganda. What makes the film's combat truly exceptional is that it portrays the tactical situation honestly. The Japanese were doomed from the start, but fought with desperate innovation against overwhelming firepower. Eastwood refused to romanticize their sacrifice or demonize their resistance, instead creating battle sequences that military academies now study for their psychological realism. Number 5. The Longest Day, 1962. Before Spielberg made us feel like we were dying on Omaha Beach, producer Darryl F. Zanuck mortgaged his house to create the most ambitious D-Day recreation ever attempted. The Longest Day featured actual D-Day veterans as consultants and cast members, including Richard Todd, who plays Major Howard but actually parachuted into Normandy on June 6, 1944. The battle sequences were so authentic that General Eisenhower himself approved the script, saying, "This is the way it was." What makes this film's combat groundbreaking is its massive scale achieved without CGI. Zanuck convinced the French government to loan him 2,000 actual troops as extras for the beach landing scenes. The production built full-size replicas of Hitler's Atlantic Wall fortifications and used genuine landing craft that had seen action on D-Day. When you see explosions sending soldiers flying, those are real concussive blasts with professional stuntmen, not digital effects. The film's most powerful sequence follows American troops at Omaha Beach, where the camera never cuts away as men drown under the weight of their equipment or get cut down by machine gun fire. Director Ken Anakin insisted on shooting in black and white because blood looks more realistic when you can't tell it's red. Military historian Stephen Ambrose noted that the film captures something most battle recreations miss: the confusion and chaos of men who can't see more than 10 feet in any direction. The battle sequences were so realistic that they're still shown at military academies. When asked about historical inaccuracies, technical advisor and D-Day veteran Lieutenant Colonel John Ramsey said, "There are some, but damn few, and none that matter." The film's $10 million budget, over $90 million today, created battle scenes of such scope and technical precision that Spielberg specifically studied them while preparing Saving Private Ryan 36 years later. As one Normandy veteran put it at the premiere, "They got the smell wrong. Otherwise, perfect." Number 4, The Thin Red Line, 1998. Terrence Malick didn't just recreate a Pacific battle. He created a philosophical nightmare that actual Guadalcanal veterans called spiritually accurate, released the same year as Saving Private Ryan. The Thin Red Line takes a radically different approach to combat. Instead of Spielberg's visceral chaos, Malick's battle for Hill 210 unfolds like a fever dream, beautiful, terrifying, and deeply surreal, much like veterans' actual memories of jungle warfare. What makes the battle sequences revolutionary is Malick's technical audacity. He shoots firefights with swirling, floating camera movements that drift between American and Japanese perspectives without judgment. Military consultant Captain Dale Dye, who also worked on Platoon and Saving Private Ryan, called it the most honest portrayal of the psychological damage of battle I've ever seen on film. The production's dedication to authenticity extended to having actors undergo a punishing 2-week jungle warfare training in the Australian wilderness. The film's most haunting sequence follows Private Witt as he witnesses a Japanese banzai charge. Rather than the typical Hollywood approach of demonizing the enemy, Malick's camera observes with almost documentary detachment as men from both sides collapse into mud. The stunning contrast between natural beauty and human brutality was achieved by filming during the magic hour of sunset, sometimes giving the production only 20 minutes per day to capture battle scenes in the perfect light. Military historian William Manchester, who fought on Guadalcanal, called the film's combat the closest I've seen to the disjointed reality of jungle fighting. What makes the battle portrayal exceptional isn't tactical precision but psychological truth, the mixture of terror, boredom, confusion, and unexpected beauty that veterans report but cinema rarely captures. When Japanese film critics saw the movie, many were moved to tears by its humane portrayal of soldiers on both sides, caught in what one veteran called a beautiful place made hell by men. Number 3, A Bridge Too Far, 1977. Director Richard Attenborough didn't just make a war movie, he created a methodical deconstruction of military hubris that actual market garden veterans called painfully accurate. With an unprecedented all-star cast including Sean Connery, Michael Caine, and Anthony Hopkins, the film meticulously chronicles the largest airborne operation in history and its catastrophic failure. Unlike most war films that celebrate victory, A Bridge Too Far examines a defeat so thorough that it extended WWII by 6 months. What makes the battle sequences revolutionary is their uncompromising scale. Attenborough convinced the Dutch government to loan him actual bridges, buildings, and terrain where the 1944 battle occurred. The production employed over 15,000 Dutch and British troops as extras, making it the largest military operation in the Netherlands since the actual Market Garden. When you see paratroopers landing en masse, those are real soldiers jumping from vintage aircraft, not stuntmen or effects. The film's most devastating sequence follows the British 1st Airborne Division's doomed stand at Arnhem Bridge, where 10,000 men were expected to hold for 48 hours, but somehow lasted 9 days against SS Panzer divisions. Military historian Cornelius Ryan, who wrote the sourcebook, interviewed over 500 participants to ensure every detail was accurate, down to the specific radio failures that doomed the operation. Attenborough's insistence on shooting scenes in sequence meant that the actors physically deteriorated during filming, matching the actual soldiers' experience. When the film premiered in the Netherlands, hundreds of Dutch resistance veterans attended, many breaking down during the sequences showing civilians caught in the crossfire. Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery, who planned the actual operation, refused to watch the film, calling it a grotesque simplification. but several of his staff officers praised its unflinching portrayal of command failures. One British veteran summarized it perfectly. "The film shows what we all knew but couldn't say. Market Garden was a brilliant plan that ignored basic intelligence about German tanks. That's why so many of my friends died." Number 2. Fury, 2014. David Ayer didn't just make a tank movie, he created a claustrophobic metal hell that actual WWII armored veterans called the real deal. With Brad Pitt commanding the Sherman tank Fury, the film culminates in a desperate last stand against a superior German SS battalion during the war's final months. What separates this from typical Hollywood tank battles is Ayer's obsession with technical accuracy. Every shell casing, radio command, and mechanical failure is period perfect. What makes the battle sequences revolutionary is Ayer's use of actual functioning WWII tanks rather than replicas or CGI. The production secured the last operational Tiger tank in the world from the Bovington Tank Museum, marking the first time this fearsome German machine appeared in a feature film using live ammunition. Ayer had the actors live in their tank for weeks during filming, eating, and sleeping inside to develop the cramped camaraderie of real tank crews. The film's most intense sequence shows Fury facing a technologically superior Tiger tank, recreating the 5-to-1 disadvantage American Shermans actually faced. Military technical advisor Kevin Vance ensured every tactical detail was correct, from the exact angle needed to penetrate Tiger armor to the specific commands used by WWII tank commanders. The battle was filmed using practical pyrotechnics and real tank movements, creating a visceral authenticity that CGI cannot match. When the film screened for the Armored Association of WWII veterans, 94-year-old Paul Andert stood up and simply said, "That's how it was." The production's attention to detail extended to the mud and grime covering everything. Costume designer Owen Thornton researched how different fluids from tanks would stain uniforms and replicated these patterns. Exactly. Military historian Stephen Zaloga praised the final battle's psychological accuracy, noting, "Tank warfare wasn't just about machines. It was about 5 men locked in a metal box, completely dependent on each other while surrounded by enemies who wanted to burn them alive." Number 1. Saving Private Ryan, 1998. Steven Spielberg didn't just recreate D-Day, he forever changed how audiences understand combat trauma. The 24-minute opening sequence following Captain Miller's unit onto Omaha Beach doesn't just show the invasion, it viscerally communicates the terror, chaos, and shocking violence that 34,250 men experienced on June 6, 1944. When the film premiered, VA hospitals nationwide reported a surge in WWII veterans seeking treatment for long-suppressed PTSD after watching the sequence. What makes this battle revolutionary is Spielberg's technical innovation. He attached cameras to metal frames that could be dragged through surf and sand. He modified camera shutters to create a staccato visual effect matching the disorienting nature of combat. The production used over 1,500 extras, including 20-plus amputees with custom prosthetics to show graphic injuries. Military advisor Captain Dale Dye insisted actors undergo actual military training, sleeping outdoors for days before filming to ensure authentic exhaustion and fear. The sequence's power comes from its uncompromising realism. When Tom Hanks's hands shake uncontrollably, that's not acting. It's the physical response to firing thousands of blank rounds. Spielberg's sound design eliminated music, instead creating a horrifying audioscape where bullets strike water with distinctive pings verified by veterans as triggering their memories. The film's desaturated color palette, achieved by bleach bypassing the film stock, matches the washed-out look of actual combat photography. When D-Day veteran James Doohan, famous for playing Scotty on Star Trek, saw the film, he reportedly said, "Now people will know," before walking out silently. Military historian Stephen Ambrose, who interviewed over 1,400 WWII veterans, called it the most realistic battle sequence I've ever seen. The Department of Defense now uses the sequence in training programs about combat stress. As World War II Marine Corps veteran Sidney Phillips put it, "It's the first war film where I didn't think, that's not how it was. Instead, I thought, that's exactly what it was like, only worse." From the shell-shocked beaches of Normandy to the claustrophobic terror of submarine warfare, these battle sequences don't just entertain. They educate and honor the reality of combat. War experts praise these films not for glorifying violence, but for their unflinching honesty about what soldiers actually experienced. Which battle sequence do you think deserves the top spot? And here's a tough question. Are these hyper-realistic depictions of war moral victories for historical truth, or are we just consuming trauma as entertainment while real veterans still struggle with the memories these films trigger?